Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you for being here for our webinar on the carbon border adjustment mechanism. We are excited to walk you through the key insights. Before we begin, let me quickly walk through today's agenda and more importantly, why each part truly matters for every Indian exporter preparing for CBAM. We'll start with the fundamentals of CBAM. What exactly is CBAM? Why has the EU introduced it now? Which product sectors fall under its scope? And most importantly, how does it impact Indian exporters like us? This opening session will give everyone a clear baseline before we move into the deeper parts of the webinar. Next, we move to the transitional phase from 2023 to 2025. This is where only reporting is required. But reporting mistakes in this phase can directly increase your risk and cost exposure in 2026. So we'll cover what needs to be reported, what the EU experts from exporters, and the common errors many manufacturers are already making. After that, we enter the permanent phase starting January 2026 when CBAM goes fully live. At this stage, verification becomes mandatory. EU exporters must start buying CBAM certificates and exporters must provide accurate product-level emission data. We'll explain exactly what data companies must supply so that your EU buyers do not face compliance risk or unexpected certificate costs. Then we'll talk about CBAM certificates, how they work, how the quantifiers are calculated, and the timeline for purchasing them. This will help manufacturers understand how your actual emissions convert into financial cost for your EU customers. We'll also break down the CBAM price calculation mechanism linked directly to the EU ETS carbon market. This will help you understand how CBAM can influence export pricing, cost competitiveness, and future negotiations. One of the most important segments will be the data and MRV applications. We'll discuss what must be monitored, what must be reported, what must be verified, and what level of evidence the EU expects. This session is the backbone of CBAM compliance. From there, we'll move into risk and readiness, what exposure Indian manufacturers currently face, how to assess your compliance level, and the key steps needed to avoid penalties, cost escalations, or even potential market loss. To make it actionable, we'll then walk you through a roadmap to January 2023, giving you a clear step-by-step plan that organizations can start implementing immediately. And finally, we'll conclude with case studies and an open QA session where we'll address the practical examples and answer your specific questions. Overall, today's section is designed to provide you with clarity, a practical action roadmap, and a complete understanding of what's required for smooth, accurate, and cost-efficient CBAM compliance. Let's move on to the slides now. CBAM Compliance Roadmap for Indian Exporters, Actions Before Jan 2026. This is the webinar agenda that we have already discussed. Let's start again. What is CBAM? The Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism is the EU's new rule that puts a carbon price on certain imports coming from countries like India. Here's what it means for us from European perspective. EU companies already pay for their emissions under the EU ETS, but exporters from outside Europe never had to pay anything similar. Because of this, high emission imports could enter the EU at a low cost, and that created a risk of carbon leakage. To fix this, the EU introduced CBAM. Now, When Indian companies export products like steel, aluminium, cement, fertilizers, hydrogen, or electricity to Europe, so effectively the EU is putting a carbon cost on Indian exporters similarly to what their own industries already pay. For Indian exporters, the key message is if your product has higher emission, the EU buyer will have to pay more. If your product is cleaner, the CBAM cost is reduced. So CBAM becomes a direct business incentive for Indian manufacturers to measure emissions accurately, reduce them, and stay competitive in the EU market. In short, we can say that CBAM is not just a climate rule, but it's market access rule for anyone selling to Europe.
Thank you for sharing the webinar overview, Jaspreet, and thanks everyone to joining this webinar. As Jaspreet was briefing about the why CBAM matters now, let me take the discussion forward. So, as we were discussing, why CBAM will impact Indian exporters. So, CBAM is not something happening far away in Europe. It will directly influence how Indian companies do business with Europe buyers. First, the Europe is one of the India's largest market for products like steel, aluminum, cements, chemicals, and engineering goods. So when the Europe start applying a carbon price on imports, Indian exporters are automatically in the spotlight. Second thing is that CBAM requires accurate emission data for each product. If Indian companies can't provide this data, the Europe importers use default values, which are usually very high and often worse than the actual emissions. That means higher CBAM cost and lower price competitiveness for Indian goods. Third point is European customers are becoming more selective. They want suppliers who can show, transparent, verified carbon data and who are taking steps to decarbonize their products. So CBAM will influence not just compliance, but future supplier selection. And finally, the cost impact. As already we discussed that if Indian exporters has high emissions, the Europe buyers will pay more for CBAM certificate. Over time, this can shift order away from higher emission suppliers to cleaner ones. So in simple words, CBAM will impact Indian exporters because it changes the way Europe judge the product, not only on price and quality, but also on carbon insensitivity. Being carbon efficient is now part of being business efficient. So let's take to the next slide. Why CBAM matters now? Yes, so CBAM isn't something we can think about later. It matters right now because especially for Indian exporters in high carbon sectors. First, the Europe in India, second largest export market. So I, any change, any change in Europe rules directly affects our market access. If our products look more carbon intensive, the European alternatives, we immediately risk our losing competitiveness. Second, the impact is concentrated in hard to abate sectors like steel, aluminum, fertilizers, hydrogen, and cement. These are exactly the sectors where India exports significant volumes to Europe. As you all know, we are mainly dominate. We dominate in steel and aluminum export worldwide. Third was the transition phase ends and certificate purchase begins. CBAM becomes a real financial obligations. Europe importers will literally pay for every ton of emitted emissions. Importers have to pay. Again, I'm repeating. This CBAM cost will be paid by Europe importers. So and if our emissions are high or if data is missing and default values apply, the cost will rise sharply. Fourth, early readiness is the only way to avoid sudden cost shock. Indian exporters need to start assessing their product carbon footprint, identifying gaps, and planning improvements now, not when the cost hits. And finally, understanding MRB. What is MRB? So it's basically monitoring, reporting, and verification. It is essential if companies get their data system right from the beginning, they can reduce future liabilities, avoid penalties, and present themselves as a reliable long-term supplies to the European exporters. So in simple term, we can say that CBAM matters now because it affects our competitiveness, creates new financial cost, and requires India exporters to build emission-ready system today, not after the rules fully apply. And so sectors which covered under CBAM, basically right now they have targeted the carbon intensive sector, and these are iron and steel, which includes mostly semi-finished steel slabs, billets. Then is finished steel products like coil, seat, bar, rods, tubes and pipes, alloy products. Second is aluminium industry, which include aluminium alloys and some downstream products. Third is cement. Fourth is fertilizer, which include ammonia, nitric acid, urea, and NPK fertilizers. And fifth one is hydrogen, and sixth one is electricity. Electricity is primarily relevant for countries exporting electricity into the European grids. So for us, for Indian companies, main industry which is going to impact is the iron and steel, aluminium, and cement. And one thing more, the downstream products are not yet included in this current CBAM, covers only basic materials, not items like masonry or consumer goods. Probably in future, they are planning to add in phase-wise manner. And from next, I mean, after beginning of definitive phase, probably they are planning to include other goods in this section. So yes, CBAM timelines. So the transition reporting phase runs from 1st of October 2023 to December 31st December 2025, during which importers report embedded emissions quarterly. Currently, many of our exporters are reporting their embedded data of their product quarterly. Yes, but no financial assessment is required now. From the 1st January 2025, Europe methods for emission reporting were accepted. Use of default values, reference values were limited. For example, complex good default values can cover up to 20% of the emissions. The definitive phase was originally to begin from 1 January 2026, when importers must start buying and surrendering certificates. But yes, it is going to begin, but probably buying of certificate, I mean, charges will be applicable from Feb 2027. So under a proposed omnibus regulations, the purchase obligation for certificate is delayed to February 2027. Correspondingly, the annual CBAM declaration deadline is proposed to shift from 31st May to 31st October. Aligning better for the EU ETS timing. Okay, so let's quickly walk through what EU expects during the CBAM transition phase, because this is the foundation on which full compliance will start. Will sit starting in 2026. So during this period, exporters submitted quarterly CBAM reports and quarterly CBAM report. During this period, these disclosures are essentially made to have the Europe establish a reliable emissions baseline for every product coming into their region. Why do these quarterly reports include? What we have to include in this report? So first, you all need to submit activity data for each quarter. This means your production volumes, operational metrics, and other process information that influence your industry emissions or product emissions. Next, you must report your energy consumption, clearly separating fuel use from electricity use. That will be considered under scope 2 and this because CBAM distinguishes between direct energy inputs and indirect electricity related emissions. Then comes the core part, embedded emissions. You need to disclose both direct emissions from your own process and indirect emissions, especially from purchased electricity or heat that are tied to the product. Overall, these quarterly submissions act as the foundation for full CBAM compliances. They help you build accurate emission tracking, understand your carbon hotspot, and later transition smoothly into the verification and certificate purchase phase from 2026 onwards. So, yes, when we look at CBAM readiness among Indian exporters, challenges are not theoretically, they are very practical. And they directly influence both compliance risk and financial exposure. So, yes, let me walk through the key barriers we see repeatedly across industries. Okay, so no process level metering. First one is no process level metering, making precise emissions tracking almost impossible. Most factories still do not have process level energy or fuel metering. Energy use is tracked at a broad plant level, not at a line or product level. Like a few days back, I have done audit of a firm. So what practical problem we are facing? Industries don't have any separate meter on process level or product level. So they have a combined meters under which all their production level, whatever they are producing, there is single metering system for electricity. And while calculating those specific embedded emissions for that amount of product which we are exporting to Europe, so we just have to take allocation based emission. So that create that force us to rely on estimates, and that is set for CBAM because we are not getting exact value how much embedded emissions on product have. So what ultimately lack of metering becomes the single biggest barrier to credible and verifiable emissions data. Second is absence of formal MRV system, which our steel industries or aluminum industry is currently lacking. So inconsistent monitoring, reporting, and verification. Even if some data is available, there is rarely a structured monitoring report and verification framework. Data is collected manually, formats differ, and many companies don't follow even standardized methodologies. Other CBAM data must be auditable, traceable, and repeatable. Any inconsistency triggers additional security scrutiny, higher risk ratings during verification, and potential rejection of submitted values. Inconsistent. Third one is inconsistent documentation process across batches and suppliers. So it's weakened end-to-end traceability. Most exporters depend on a mix of internal production batches and multiple external suppliers. But documentation is rarely uniform. Formats, quality parameters, batch level fuel use, raw material emissions. This differs widely in industries. So for CBAM, this traceability and this variability is a big problem. Importers need traceability from raw materials to final product. If documentation is patchy or inconsistent, the entire supply chain becomes non-variable. Limited upstream data, restricting it basically restrict scope 3 accuracy. Just a minute, let me. Yes. And the fourth one is limited upstream supplier data. So restricting scope 3 accuracy. Here we are talking about restricting scope 3 accuracy. So another major challenge is upstream suppliers, especially small and mid-scale players, don't provide the carbon related data at all. Many don't have any environmental tracking system. As a result, exporters lack the upstream emissions required for Scope 3 calculations. CBAM does not allow use of conservative values, but doing so inflates product emissions, making exporters appear more carbon intensive, and they actually are, which directly impacts the competitiveness. So fifth one here, we are talking about heavy reliance on default values, increasing risk of non-compliance and penalties. When real emission data is missing, companies default to European standards value or temporary default factors, but these are designed to be conservative. So the moment you use default values, your product emission inflate. From 2026 onwards, reliance on different default value will trigger red flags. Additional verification requirements and in some case penalties might be on higher CBAM certificates obligations, will generate higher CBAM certificate obligations. In simple terms, default values are a short-term solution, but a long-term financial risk. So these barriers collectively create a significant compliance challenge, but more importantly, they also translate into real financial exposure through higher carbon cost, higher verification burden, and reduced acceptance by Europe buyers. The good news is that each of these barriers is solvable with the right MRV setup, process level data tracking, and supplier engagement, which we will discuss in the next section. So, yes, why default value are a risk? So higher default factors basically inflate CBAM cost right now. Default values are intentionally conservative. They are set higher than real emissions to push companies to it using primary data. So when an exporter uses defaults, the embedded emissions look artificially very high. That means Europe exporters end up surrendering more CBAM certificates. And that extra cost eventually reflects on the exporters' pricing and competitiveness. Second one is overestimated emissions reduce market competitiveness. If your product appears more carbon intensive than your competitors, European buyers will choose lower emission alternatives. Even a small inflation in declared emission directly translates into higher carbon cost per ton, making Indian exporters look less attractive on price. From 2026 onward, only auditable primary data will be acceptable. So we are about to in this transition phase. So this is last quarter going on. From 2026, there will be verification of primary data, and that data will be acceptable. So the transition periods end in December 2025. After that, Europe authorities will only accept primary products specific emission backed by verifiable data. Default values will no longer be allowed for compliance. And this creates a very clear message. Companies have to put systems in place now, because from 2026, the standards will be strict and it will be evidence-based MRV. So ban on default forces investment in robust MRV and data management system. This phase out of default factors will mean that exporters have to implement metering, process level monitoring, data collection, and proper documentation. Without this, emissions cannot be verified, because I already told you previous case studies that industry don't have MRV system on place, and we are just figuring this numbers on the basis of assumptions, which means products cannot be matched with correct CBAM certificates, and buyers may simply sit to suppliers who are more compliant, who are more competitive. So naturally, buyers will move towards industries or exporters who are compiling with these compliances. And this action is straightforward. I mean, you have to measure, you have to document and audit emissions now. And in fact, early MRB readiness prevents cost shock later. So it will give you a safeguard access to Europe markets and will position you as reliable, low-risk suppliers among traders from Europe. From 2026 onwards, CBAM moves into permanent operation phase as discussed. Yes, so from 2026 onwards, CBAM moves into permanent operation phase. This is when the real compliance obligation will begin. Yes. So let me break down what becomes mandatory. So CBAM certificate purchase and surrender become compulsory. Unlike the current transition period, the permanent phase requires Europe importers to actually buy and surrender CBAM certificate. These certificates reflects the emitted emissions of your product, which means higher emission is for more certificate, and more certificate means you are paying more cost. So any inaccuracy or reliance on default values uh, will increase the financial burden on buyers. So exporters who cannot provide reliable primary data will indirectly make their own products more expensive and less competitive in the Europe market. Second is approved monitoring plans will become mandatory. Every installation and that supplies product into the Europe must have a formal CBAM monitoring plan approved by authorities. And this is not optional. It must describe this plan must describe methodology used, data source, measurement system calculation, what are calculation approaches, and what internal controls are placed. So this plan will become a backbone of your emission reporting. Without an approved monitoring plan, your data won't be accepted, and importers cannot claim correct CBAM values. Digital MRB system, which is, I think soon it will be essential for industries. Although not legally mandatory, but digital MRB is practically required. Manual spreadsheet cannot meet CBAM auditability standards. So digital system will ensure standardized data capture. It will help you in real-time monitoring. It will help in traceability across batches, and it will be easy for verification agents to verify this data. So European regulators expect high quality auditable digital data, especially once default values are banned. Companies relying on manual system will struggle to demonstrate reliability during this verification process. And the fourth one is organization investment and process upgrade become inevitable. So to meet this requirement, companies will need to invest in process level metering, energy monitoring hardware, internal MRB teams, supplier engagement systems, and documentation practices. These updates are not compliance add-ons, so they become more operational requirements. Europe buyers will actively prefer suppliers who can provide verified low carbon digitally managed emissions data. Closing, yes, so 2026 is not just a policy milestone. It basically marks a structural shift where emission transparency becomes directly linked to market access and cost competitiveness, obviously. The companies that prepare now will be the ones that hold their position in the Europe markets. Because the importers from Europe will prefer exporters or industries who have low carbon emissions or low emitted carbon emissions in their product, because finally that will reduce their cost. So let us discuss what are CBAM certificates. So to understand the cost impact of CBAM, we first need to understand what CBAM certificates actually are. So they are basically a core financial mechanism of the regulations. So one certificate 1 ton of, we can say it's 1 ton of CO2 equivalent emitted in the product. So each C1 certificate represents exactly a ton of CO2 equivalent emissions emitted in the imported product. If a product has higher emissions, the Europe importer must surrender more certificates. So the amount of carbon in your product directly translate into a financial obligation in the Europe. It will be issued by the European Union. It will these certificates will be digital and controlled compliance units. CBAM certificates are not traded right now in open markets. It will not trade in open markets. They are issued, it will be issued exclusively by the European Commission and made available to authorities of Europe importers. The price of these certificates is linked to EU ETS carbon price. They are held digitally in the importer's CBAM registry account. So there will be a separate registry accounts for CBAM registered importers, and it will be held in their account. Yes, so this certificate will be purchased and surrendered by Europe importers, but cost flow backs to the import exporters. Just a second, I would like to have a break. Okay, sorry. Yes, so we were discussing about purchase and surrender by Europe importers. So only Europe importers are legally allowed to buy and surrender these certificates, but the cost does not stay with the importers. It flows back to you. So the exporters will, what exporters will do, they will negotiate pricing, will revise your commercial terms, contract adjustments, and competitive comparison. They will do competitive comparison with the other suppliers. So even though exporters don't directly buy certificates, they definitely will feel the financial impact. So exporters must understand in India right now how certificates work, because exporters need a clear understanding of certificate pricing, surrender cycles, and emissions calculations, because ultimately it will affect landed cost. It influences how buyers evaluate suppliers, and it saves contract negotiations. Knowing how certificates are valued helps exporters justify their data. It demonstrates lower emissions and negotiate fair pricing with Europe partners. So we can say that in short, CBAM certificates converts your carbon footprint into a direct monetary value, and that's why accurate, verifiable emissions data become a strategic advantage. A very common question we get is who actually buys CBAM certificates, and more importantly, how does it affect exporters? So yes, let me break it down. Yes, so only the Europe importer, as already I told you guys, that will purchase certificate. So under CBAM, the only entity will allow to buy certificates is authorized Europe importers, also known as CBAM declarant. So they purchase this certificate directly from Europe Central CBAM registries. Exporters in India or any other non-European country cannot buy, hold, or manage these certificates. So, yes, so exporters are not going to buy certificate, but their emission decide how many the importers must buy. Even though exporters never buy the certificates, their reported embedded emissions data will determine how many certificate the Europe importers must purchase and surrender. So the exporter data accuracy, transparency, and quality of MRV will directly save the importers financial obligations. More emission, that will more certificate, and this more certificate if importers have to buy, so they have to pay more price, and the cost of the product will be more in compared to clean carbon product or the products with less emitted emissions. So importers will naturally prefer suppliers with low carbon footprints because certificates purchase translate into real financial cost. Importers start comparing this suppliers based on carbon intensity. They will prefer suppliers who will provide reliable primary data, will have lower process emissions, sorry, and help minimize CBAM liabilities. So emission performance becomes a procurement metrics, just like price, quality, or delivery timelines. So commercial incentives will, definitely push exporters towards optimization. This is going to create a strong business incentive for exporters, improving emissions data and reducing your carbon footprint will directly is going to benefit your buyers, and in turn this will strengthen your commercial position in market. As exporter who can demonstrate low verifiable emissions will be more competitive in market, and they were more resilient and more likely to retain Europe market access. So while the importers handle the formal purchase of CBAM certificates, the exporters, the Indian exporters, the Indian companies, the Indian industries is going to control the number of certificates required for the importers. And that's where the real commercial leverages lies for Indian exporters or Indian industries. So now let's look at how the CBAM certificate requirement is actually calculated. So this is the part importers care about the most because it determines their final cost, and it directly influenced by the exporters emission data. So basically the core formula is the basic calculation is straightforward. There's not many rocket science in this. So we take emitted emissions of the imported product multiplied by UETS carbon price and subtract any carbon price already paid in the country of the origin. So the remaining values determines both. So how many CBAM certificates the importers must surrender, and it will also determine the total cost they need to pay further. Sorry. So multiply embedded emissions by the UETS price. The first step here will be if your product has higher embedded emissions, the importers must surrender more certificates. This is why exporters with inaccurate or inflated emissions data end up looking more expensive in compared to low carbon competitors. And right now, many industries are facing serious questions from their importers. They are asking few industries. We have deal with few industries, and their importers are asking that why your values are inflated. And frankly telling you, the main reason is they don't have a MRV system in place. That's the reason. So here again we will subtract domestic carbon price paid. So in fact, CBAM it avoid double charging. So if the home country already has a carbon tax or ETS, the amount is deducted from the final CBAM obligation. And I think today India does not have any domestic carbon price that qualifies for CBAM deduction, but I think government is working on that, and they have launched in a carbon market. So basically output is certificate require the total cost. Once these adjustments are made, the importer knows exactly how many certificates they must purchase and the financial liability associated with your products. This is what drive pricing discussions and supplier preferences. So yes, here one thing more, data accuracy is everything. To get the right two piece of data are absolutely here critical. So accurate embedded emissions based on primary product label MRB and the clear carbon pricing differential, meaning whether any carbon cost was already paid locally. If either of these is weak, the calculation become conservative, and conservative always means costlier. So here again the question rises, why this matter before January 2026? Once the permanent phase starts in 2026, so this buyers must have to buy certificates for every shipment. And from 2027 onwards, they have to pay price for those certificates. So, yes, understanding this formula is essential because it is literally the bridge between your emission data and your buyer's cost exposures. Okay, so let's discuss certificate price setting. Let's make this very real with a simple example. So, if you export steel to the Europe, how does CBAM translate into actual cost per ton? Here is a practical calculation like embedded emissions 1.8 ton CO2 equivalent per ton of steel. So assume your steel product has embedded emission of 1.8 ton of CO2 equivalent per ton of output. This is common value for Indian mills unless they have any advanced energy efficiency or low carbon inputs. So how importers purchase CBAM certificates? Now let's walk through how CBAM certificates are purchased and managed by Europe importers. So Europe CBAM registries basically will issuing certificate. First, the European Union is sole issuer of those certificates. These certificates are created centrally for compliance purpose, and no other entity is going to buy or issue these certificates. So this will ensure uniformity and control over the carbon compliance system. Certificate allocated to importers account. Once issued, each certificate is uniquely assigned to an importer's CBAM registry account. This linkage is critical for traceability. Every certificate is traceable back to importing company and it cannot be used by anyone else. Certificates are non-transferable. Certificates cannot be sold or moved between companies. They are legally tied to the importer's account. This will prevent market manipulation and will ensure that CBAM obligations are strictly enforced. Importers records and compliance tracking. Europe importers have to match their imported volumes with the corresponding numbers of certificates in each their account. This forms the basic of reporting of compliance enforcement. So essentially, each ton of embedded emission is tied to one certificate. So it will help in administrative coordination with suppliers as well. So while issuance and tracking are centralized, the system still relies on accurate data from suppliers. That means exporters must provide precise, verifiable emissions data. Any discrepancies can compliance for the importer, which in turn can affect commercial relationship. So let us discuss how about certification surrender process. Okay, so how importers purchase CBAM certificates. So the CBAM certificate basically surrenders, it is a surrender process. It is a critical step in compliance and it directly depends on accurate MRV system and proper administrative coordination. So emission verification before surrendering certificates, importers must confirm the verified emissions using accurate MRV system. This will ensure that the number of certificates reflects the true embedded emission in the product. And they have to surrender by May 31st, I think. Importers are required to surrender these certificates. The surrender quantity must and match the verified emissions for the previous year. Missing this deadline can result in penalties and compliances issues there will be for importers. If the importers holds fewer certificates than required, a shortfall will occur. This will trigger a financial penalties and mandates an immediate top-up purchase. For of certificates to cover the missing volume and ensuring compliances. So calculated certificates will be needed. The importers will calculate the exact number of certificates which will require to match verified emissions. Accurate calculation depends on precise activity and emissions data provided by exporters. Excess surrender they have to surrender excess certificates if they have purchased, and for that they will get refund. Administrative coordination, successful certificate surrenders requires very smooth coordination between importers and exporters. So in short, the certificate surrenders process is a link between verified emissions data and actual financial obligations. So accurate MRB and a strong coordination between exporters and importers are basically a key to avoid penalties and optimizing compliance costs. Monitoring plan requirement. Why do we require it? Okay, so let us discuss this point. So yes, a robust monitoring plan is, foundation for credible emission reporting and CBAM compliances. It will ensure that every step of emission measurement, reporting, and verification traceable and reliable. Identifying emission sources and measurement point. So the plan here is that it identify all emission sources across production process and define precise measurement point for each. This will ensure that all relevant emissions are captured accurately. Document fuel and electricity measurement methods. All methods for measuring fuel documentation, fuel consumption and electricity use must be documented, including the types of meters. And I will ask you all guys to concentrate here because this is very critical points which needs to be implemented in our system, in our industrial system, or exporters or manufacturers who right now are engaged with the European traders. So yes, first what we have to do, we have to identify our emission sources and measurement points. Then we have to document our fuel and electricity measurement methods. Third is a specific analysis methodology. So include like sampling procedures, laboratory selection, and standard use for analysis. This we all have, we have to figure this out, and this will ensure all chemical or process related emissions such as calcination or reduction are properly quantified. Fourth one is map data flow and responsibilities. So what we have to do here, data flow must be mapped into end, showing how information moves from measurement to reporting with clear assignment of responsibilities at each step. And this will prevent errors and ensure accountability. And we have to here define control procedures. Like control procedures should be in place to verify data accuracy and consistency. This includes internal checks, calibration, schedules, and validation steps to catch anomalies early as soon as possible. And the most important part is here, support exporter verification and Europe compliances. So verification is the most important part here. The monitoring plan should provide a framework that support verification by third parties and meets the Europe CBAM compliance requirement. A strong plan will ensure your data is credible and auditable. So a well-documented monitoring plan is not just a regulatory requirement. So it's the backbone of, so like we treat this as a, as a compliance, we treat this as a compliance obligations. And so this is not exactly a compliance obligation, not only a compliance or regulatory requirement. It is the backbone of accurate emission data verification readiness will really reduce your financial burden or financial cost of your products. And it is going to give you competitive advantage in the Europe market. MRB, let's discuss about MRB expectations. I think we are going to reach 5 in just a minute. Yes. So, so for this, we have to, we have to do robust evidence for each unreported value. Every emissions value, we have to be supporting evidence for our every emissions, whatever we emit. For that, we need strong evidence for that, whether it's from mass or energy balance, meter logs, or laboratory results. We need to validate this this data. So validation should include checks, energy balance comparisons, and cross checks across different data sets. This will confirm that reported emissions are consistent and accurate. Third one is meter calibration. So we have to, all our meters used for measurement must be calibrated regularly with time stamped records maintained. This is essential to demonstrate the reliability of readings during verification and audits. Reference emissions factors used for calculation must be documented and traceable. So like detailed calculation notes should accompany with for every reported value. So auditors can understand when verifiers and auditors are coming to audit your documents, can understand and verify the methodology. Comprehensive auditable records should be kept by the industries. So all evidence logs and supporting data should be maintained in the auditable format. This will ensure credibility of claims and protects the exporters from penalties or other disputes. So, in a sense, what we can say that CBAM MRV requires nothing less than fully traceable evidence-based emissions reporting. Is the foundation with its foundation of compliance and credibility and competitiveness in the Europe market. We are about to reach, I think, we can continue. Yes, okay. So let us discuss about. Okay. Let me summarize this. So activity data, what will be required? Okay. I think it's is PPT visible for to all? Jaspreet or Amit?
Yes, it is visible.
Okay. Okay. Yes, so here we are discussing about activity, what data is required here. So activity data is the basically core input for calculating embedded emissions, which directly determines CBAM certificate requirement. Accurate granular data is basically essential for compliance and cost management. So production value, we have to track production values by product and time period. This is the baseline for allocating emissions per unit of the product. Record raw material type, quantity, and supply details. Upstream emissions from suppliers feed into scope 3 calculations. So this information is very critical. Next, we have to document fuel types, quantity, and net calorific values for each fuel. This will ensure accurate conversion from fuel consumption to CO2 emissions. And the fourth one is capturing metered electricity used by process or site. So differentiating grid versus renewable sources will definitely affect your emission intensity. And the fifth one is here process emissions. So include all process specific emissions such as calcination, reduction, or anode consumptions. So we have to record volumes and source points to ensure traceability. Sixth, we can here say that input quality and process parameters, which where we can have to determine and note parameters that will influence our emissions, such as raw material purity, operating temperature, and chemical composition. So these factors will directly impact the emissions factors applied. Linkage to embedded emissions and certificates. So all activity data must be linked systematically to emissions calculations, like enabling accurate estimations or required CBAM certificates and supporting audit readiness. So in short, we can say that comprehensive detailed activity data is the foundation for this accurate emission reporting and CBAM compliances. And and this will really going to reduce and minimize your financial exposure. Next, we can say that what will help in achieving this. So digital, I'm sure the digital MRB system is going to play a critical role in this. So digital MRB system basically enable for accurate, traceable, and efficient CBAM compliances. So its component, its core components. If we talk about its core component, so it can act as a central data capture. So all data from production, fuel and electricity meters, process emissions and upstream suppliers inputs will be captured centrally. So this will ensure consistency in your data. It will reduce errors and will provide a single source of truth for emissions calculations. So and it will help you in automatic calculations. So this system calculate emissions using embedded formulas and emissions factors. So automation reduce your manual errors and will it speed your reporting. It will also help in maintaining your audit trails. Every actions in the system, data entry and updates or approvals will be managed and it will create a fully auditable trail, critical for both internal control. It will help you internally and third-party verification of auditors or authorities. So yes, all supporting evidence, it will collect your all supporting evidence, meter readings, laboratory results, invoices, supplies data, and it will store digitally under the system. So it will allows for quick access during verification, ensure all claims are supported and trustable evidence. So this will create more trust. It will create more trust among traders in your data. So reporting dashboard will provide visualization of emissions progress against target certificates requirements, and it will respond if enables management and export teams to monitor compliances, make decisions, and communicate transparently with the Europe importers. And again, the most important thing is this compliance and verification are really cornerstone of CBAM, and especially verification of your CBAM data. So exporters and importers must ensure that all reported emissions are accurate, auditable, and traceable to avoid penalties and maintain market access. In short, we can say MRP system will really help you in achieving these compliances. So risk assessment for Indian exporters is very essential to prioritize efforts and reduce both CBAM liability and compliance failures. Not only exporters face the same level of risk, so classifying them help focus resource effectively. Like high risk categories, certain industries really face higher CBAM risk due to inherently high emission and data gaps like BOF steel industry, blast furnace, basic oxygen furnace route is really carbon intensive. Aluminium smelters using non-renewable power, fertilizer plants producing ammonia from natural gases. These process emissions and limited MRV system will really create high risk among exporters. And the exporters must prioritize monitoring, meter installation, and verification to minimize their carbon liability or cost liability. If you talk about medium risk categories, medium risk exporters include multi-plant exporters, contract manufacturers, and weak documentation controls. So like when we talk about weak documentation controls, so data gap and non-standardized reporting can really create a compliance issue. So these exporters should strengthen their or industries, so they strengthen their SOPs, data collection, and internal control system. And the purpose of this classification is this risk-based approach really allows exporters to focus, monitoring and data collection of the highest risk areas. It will prioritize controls where errors or defaults would have the largest financial impacts. It will really ensure readiness ahead of CBAM permanent phase, which is going to begin in January 2026. And in short, we can say that understanding risk levels really help Indian exporters allocate resource effectively. It will help in reducing CBAM liability and will avoid cost compliances failures. So let us discuss about CBAM readiness gaps in India. So this I'm going to discuss based on my experience, what I have understand from previous projects, verification audits. or gap assessment what we have done in previous last 1 years. So I'm going to share my experience, what I find here in Indian industries. So Indian exporters really is going to face several readiness gap, and that must be addressed to comply with Europe CBAM requirements. So really closing these gaps is very critical to reduce liability and maintain market access. The first and most important factors, what I figure out is incomplete process level metering. Many exporters, what I find that many exporters really lack granular meters at the process level. Uh, uh, if there are 5 production process, if they have set up, so they have not a meter on process level. So without detailed measurements, accurate allocation of emissions to product to a specific project, like industry is producing hundreds of products, but they are not metering, or we are unable to allocate product specific emissions for that specific product, because what we find that it lead to overestimation of the default values. And the second is the weak verification culture. We really avoid here in industries, usually avoid the verification culture, in fact, internally also. So internal verification and cross checks are often missing. Weak verification culture undermines trust in reported data and can lead to a swing during third-party audits or Europe inspections. Missing supplier emissions data. I mean, really, this is again most critical part here, because you can control what is yours, but you can't control what is suppliers data. So upstream emissions from suppliers are often unreported or incomplete. Without this data, fully life cycle emissions cannot be calculated, and it will risk inaccuracies in CBAM reporting. No SOPs. There are no SOPs for emissions data. I have seen lot of industries. Lot of industries are doing really good. So yes, there should be a standard operating procedure for emission data. I mean, they have for other division or other compliances, but for emission data calculation, they should have standard SOPs for data collection and reporting. And these are absent in many organizations. This leads basically inconsistent practice and weak audit trails, increasing the risk of non-compliances. So, one thing more last is that reliance on Excel. So this is also many exporters right now rely on Excel spreadsheet for emission tracking. And this may create in future, not right now, it's okay, we are in transition phase, but in future, they will have to go on MRV system. So these gaps collectively increase the risk of non-compliant reporting, and it can really result in severe penalties, financial loss, and restricted access to Europe's market. So addressing these gaps through proper metering, verification. Again, I'm focusing here what we have to do to close this gap. So we have to address through proper metering. We should do verification. We should have proper SOPs and supplier data collection system. And if it is possible, we should have a digital system for essential for this CBAM readiness, and it will to protect our competitiveness in market. So yes, let's discuss roadmap for this immediate actions. What we should take. So roadmap, we focuses on immediate actions to establish a strong foundation for CBAM compliances. So first of all, we should establish a baseline emissions, measure the document current emissions across all product and process. This baseline provides basically a reference point for all future reporting and reduction initiatives. We should have a draft monitoring plan. This will help in prepare a preliminary monitoring plan that will identify your emission sources, measurement points, and data responsibilities. This will literally will guide data collection and support verification readiness. We should have we should begin aligning process system and team with expected CBAM permanent phase requirements. So this will include verification of your readiness, what current at which stage you guys are. So yes, and the most important is to identify what gaps are there, and address those gaps. So by assessing current data availability and pinpoint missing information, such as like if someone is missing supply emissions or process level measurement or activity data. So closing these gaps early will reduce your compliance risk. Improving quarterly CBAM reporting will strengthen your reporting practices by improving accuracy, inconsistency, and will completeness of quality quarterly CBAM data summation, which currently I think this is last quarter is going to be reported. And this will really build your confidence in data quality and will support your smoother verification in 2026. Initial suppliers onboarding templates will engage suppliers early to collect upstream emission data through structured templates, which you can create, or you can standardize your supply reporting timely, and it will create integration into overall emission calculation. So this steps need to be taken immediate. In fact, a lot of industry has taken in 2024. So exporters lay the groundwork for accurate reporting, verification readiness, and smoother compliance when the permanent phase will begin prior to that. And the most after this, the most critical actions for CBAM readiness is. So yes, 2025 was really critical year to strengthen the CBAM readiness. Action taken in this year will really direct impact compliances, will cost management, and will help you in reducing risk when the permanent phase will begin from 2026. So yes, what we have to do, we have to install meters and instruments. We'll deploy process level meters and instrument across all production points. Accurate measurement of fuel, electricity, and process emission really is essential to calculate real emissions rather than relying on default values, because default values, guys, really is going to inflate your cost from 2026 onwards. And really, importers are going to avoid such values, will love to avoid such values because they have to pay for that. So I think Indian industries should train their teams also. So they conduct training sessions for all personnel involved in data collection, reporting, and verification. Awareness and competence are key to accurate data entry, monitoring, and compliances. Conduct a mock verification. So run internal mock audits to stimulate third-party verification, identify gaps, correct your errors, and refine process to ensure smooth formal verification in the permanent phase. Transition fully to primary data. Move away from default values to fully verified primary emissions data. This reduce CBAM liability, it will avoid your penalties, and will really build your credibility with Europe importers. So a lot of industry right now, trying to avoid their, they are taking it as a burden that we have to pay for verification agencies, or they are avoiding to verify their data. But I'm really, this is going to help you in from 2026 onwards. This will become industries or exporters who are adopting this system at early stage it will become boon for them. And really it is going to benefits the CBAM compliances. So it will detect inconsistency at early stage. It will reduce reporting errors. It will help you in traceability, and it will also help you in decision support. So by completing this critical actions by 2025, if you are not done till now, you can start from now and complete by mid 2026. So exporters will really secure accurate emissions data. They will strengthen their MRB system internally and will significantly reduce financial and compliance risk ahead of 2026. So let's discuss how 2026 is going to be, what we have to do for 2026. So January 2026 marks really a critical milestone. It's when the permanent CBAM phase will kick in. So exporters and importers have to prepare from a data process and verification standpoint to ensure compliances and will maintain competitiveness. So here preparing MRB and monitoring plan should be your first priority. So ensure your MRV system and monitoring plan are fully aligned with CBAM rules. You need a documented plan for that, and that clearly will define emission sources, measurement points, and responsibilities. So this plan will reflect supplier and upstream emissions. So your reporting includes your full carbon footprint of your product. And after when you report all this carbon footprint or embedded carbon footprint of your product or embedded emissions in your products, so after that collect all this data and validate emissions data. So gather all the primary data from all relevant emission drivers. That is fuel, what fuel you're using, electricity consumptions, process emissions, suppliers data. Validate that data carefully and reconcile it and check energy balances and ensure your number can be backed by evidence. Whatever number you are going to claim, that should be backed by evidence. For that, you have to keep all evidence or manage your evidences. So for that, industries and exporters should undergo independent verification, and I will recommend pre-verification of your data. That will help you in identifying all the gaps, and you can figure out what gaps are there and how you can achieve that. I mean, close those gaps. So here, independent verification agencies like yes, we are independent verification agencies here, KBA certifications. We are also accredited under NABCB for 10064 audits. And so yes, engage an accredited third-party verifier to review your emissions. For pre-verification, I am telling a letter from 2026. Verification agencies will be accredited from EU ETS, which we are on the process to get accreditation from EU ETS for verification. So yes, engage accredited third-party verifiers to review emissions, set up your MRB process and data, and be ready for site visits, audit of your monitoring plan, meter calibration records, and your data collection methodology. Build a comprehensive evidence package like meter logs, lab reports, supplies, mission, declaration, calibration certificates, calculation spreadsheet. Everything should be stored, organized, and traceable. Your documentation, again, I'm repeating, your documentation must follow an audit trail. I mean, because audit is where it will decide what and how value of emitted emissions in your product. That cost, the certificate will be generated on the basis of audit. So audit trail is very easy to verify, to examine if you have maintained your audit trail. So coordinate with your importers. So maintain close alignment with them, with your Europe importers. They will rely on your verified emissions data to determine their CBAM certificate surrender volumes. So yes, share your monitoring values, evidence files, and emission data sheet with them in a structured way, so they can confidentially report and purchase the correct numbers of certificates, mitigate non-compliance risk. So this will help you identify and close any data gaps, as already discussed, or weak spots before you go live. So missing data, unverifiable records, or inconsistent tracking can lead to non-compliances. So that will again impose a financial liabilities on your business. So implement internal audits or mock verification exercise. In fact, you guys should start from in last quarter from 2025 to catch early. So yes, let us discuss. I think. So in summary, we can say that January 2026 is not just a regulatory deadline. It is a watershed moment for our CBAM readiness. Exporters who deploy strong MRB verified emissions and really well documented evidence will be, better place to manage CBAM cost and maintain Europe market access. And it will build long-term credibility with the importers as well. So if we are talking about cost modeling, so CBAM basically introduce a direct cost link to emitted carbon. Accurate cost modeling allows exporters to forecast impacts, plan strategically. It will help and will protect margins. So forecast your ETS price scenarios, like simulate different ETS price scenarios to understand potential certificate cost. price fluctuates, so multiple scenarios will help anticipate best and worst case financial impacts. It will use modeling results to plan certificate purchase in advance and renegotiate contracts with Europe buyers if necessary. This will ensure smoother cash flow and avoid last-minute financial shocks. So, like, see, we can do scenario analysis of EU ETS fluctuations as well. So, under this, analyze how change in ETS price affects CBAM liabilities. This will enable exporters to understand the cost sensitivity of different products and adjust production of supply strategy accordingly. So strategic decision support, it will help in strategic decision support cost modeling, like cost modeling informs strategic decision. For example, let us say whether to invest in emission reduction measures, low carbon supplies, or prioritize carbon certain markets to minimize CBAM exposures. It will also, assess impacts on export margins, like evaluate how CBAM cost will affect profit margins, identify where renegotiation with importers is needed, and quantify margin erosion risk for each product line. And in a sense, we can say that cost impact modeling is not just accounting, it is a strategic tool to maintain competitiveness, optimizing price, and manage CBAM related financial risk proactively. So let me take through you guys a realistic case of how steel exporters tackle CBAM risk. So this company was initially relying on default emissions and lacked process level metering. As a result, their embedded emission carbon looked very high, which increased the CBAM burden for their Europe buy will increase in future. So to fix this, they installed flow meters on key process line and set up a digital logging system to automatically capture the real-time data. So with this tool, they moved from default emissions, which they were using early, to measured primary data. Then they brought in a verifier to audit. In fact, we verified their data and certified their data. So this result were really, it was compelling. They discovered that their real emissions were 12 to 15% lower than what default based model has estimated. So this translated into significant CBAM cost. It is going to reduce their CBAM cost in futures. So obviously Europe buyers will prefer them. Beyond that, they also gained a competitive advantage because they could prove they are a low supplier, a carbon supplier. So yes, so the last question is here, who can do CBAM verification? So yes, from 2026, accredited Europe-based verifiers will be verifying data which will be generated from January 2026, and they all will be verifiers accredited by EU ETS. So for them, it is required ISO 4006/2020 accreditations, accredited verification bodies. They should be accredited under EU ETS CBAM accreditation framework, accredited by national accreditation body of a non-Europe, any Europe member state. And yes, we can say that we are accredited under ISO 4065. We are on the process to get accreditations under EU ETS system and get registered by CBAM accreditation framework. So as discussed here. Okay, so yes, so finally we can say that hope this session was very fruitful for all, especially for exporters and industries. Our clients, few of our clients have also joined the sessions. Hopeful it will give clear picture to them that how to take a step further and what data, what gaps are there missing. So yes, so Jaspreet, if you can continue, there is any questions you have mentioned or you have, is there any questions from any of the members? So you can put few questions. I will try to address that.
Well, thank you, Abhinav, for this insightful and informative webinar on CBAM. Your explanations were clear, practical, and extremely valuable for everyone present here. So let's on to some question answer round. So I have one question with me. If you do have some questions, you can drop down in the chat box. So we have first question is, which process or emission should we measure first?
Okay. So yes, a complaint plan must include emission sources, measurement points, fuel acidity, measurement methods, laboratory methodology, data flow, responsibilities, and control procedures.
Okay, any other questions? If anybody would like to ask? So let's conclude the session then. Thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you.